Gold. For thousands of years, humans have sought after it. Many wars have been fought and countless people have died for it. It has represented power and wealth throughout history, and the Inca people even thought gold was the sweat of the sun and believed it held regenerative powers. Some people still believe that the US dollar is backed up by gold, but this is not true. When the United States was on the gold standard, a family could afford to live the American dream, with only one person working in the household. You could afford to have a house, you could afford 2 cars, your wife could stay at home if she wanted to and take care of the kids, and you could afford to take vacations with your family at least a couple of times a year. Then when they grew up, you could afford to send them off to college. After all of that, you would still have enough money to retire at a reasonable age. But those days are gone now, and it's all because the only thing backing up the dollar is the people's faith in the government and the fact that the dollar is the world's reserve currency for now. If we continue to print money, however, at the exponential rate that we have been since 1971 when we left the gold standard, it's only a matter of time until the United States defaults on our debts and we lose our position as the world reserve currency holder. In 1971, during the Vietnam War, countries around the world started to speculate that maybe the United States did not hold enough gold to back up all of the dollars they were printing for the war. Because of this, they started to trade in their United States dollars for actual physical gold. Richard Nixon reacted to this by taking us off of the gold standard in 1971 in a supposed temporary measure to protect the value of the dollar.
I have directed the Secretary of the Treasury to take the action necessary to defend the dollar against the speculators. I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets, except in amounts and conditions determined to be in the interest of monetary stability and in the best interest of the United States.
We were supposed to go back on the gold standard, but never did. And since then, we have been borrowing money to purchase items from other countries, putting ourselves deeper into debt. We make almost no products whatsoever. We just send all our money overseas, and in return, we get low-cost items made for cheap labor that disincentivizes manufacturers in America to employ American citizens, pushing these jobs overseas. On top of all that, the whole United States dollar monetary system has become a gigantic Ponzi scheme that is bound to collapse eventually one day. To print money, the Treasury asks the Fed for a loan. The Treasury creates a bond, an agreement to repay, and then gives it to the Fed. The Fed then prints the money and gives it to the Treasury, and the Treasury uses the money that the Fed printed to pay for government expenses. The Fed then sells the bonds they got from the Treasury to other central banks around the world, pension funds, and sometimes even the people. These bonds must then be paid back when they come to maturity, plus interest. The Treasury then borrows more money from the Fed to pay back those bonds and the interest, plus the next round of expenses for running the country, and the cycle repeats. The government cannot pay the interest on these bonds without printing more money, because taxes could never cover the insane amount of printing that the government has been doing. If a Treasury auction ever goes bad, or China ever decides to sell some of its US Treasury bonds that they hold and no one is willing to buy, then we will see interest rates go up and the Fed will have to step in. This is where the Fed put comes in, and they continue buying bonds, increasing the balance sheet and causing hyperinflation. If the government keeps having to buy bonds to pay the minimum interest payments on the previous bonds, it will have no more tools to fight inflation very soon. When hyperinflation comes, people will panic. Governments that own US bonds will try to sell them, and pensions will become worthless. This means the largest generation to ever enter retirement age will have their retirement funds evaporate, and as the dollar continues to fall, imported goods will rise in price. Since we don't make anything here and we import everything from China, this means everything is going to go up in price, making inflation even worse. As interest rates rise and the labor costs increase, this will cost businesses more money that they will have to pass on to the consumer, and the cycle becomes more vicious. These businesses will start to cut costs, and that means letting go of employees. In the beginning of the Great Depression, the unemployment rate went from 3.2% in 1928 to 24.9% only 5 years later in 1933. If we see hyperinflation along with mass layoffs and huge unemployment rates, we will be seeing a lot of desperate people and almost certainly significant social unrest. Desperate people do desperate things. This means looting, stealing, murder, and possibly even the full disintegration of the society that we live in as we know it. Currently, as of this recording, inflation reports from the government stand at 7.5%. Many people believe that these numbers are much higher than that because they are actually very manipulated, just like the value of the US dollar. There is no sign of inflation stopping as of now. It could go to 10%, 25%, or even 50%. Most people's incomes have not increased by 7.5% in the last year, and certainly won't go up 25% in the next year. At some point, this is going to become unbearable for the average person to handle. My only question to you is, when will you start to panic?